The rain hammers against the windows of the modest two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. It's past midnight, and the street below is quiet, except for the percussion of water against concrete. Inside, the television murmurs through a late-night news cycle. Bloomberg reporting on quarterly earnings, celebrity gossip, the usual Tuesday night filler. Nyla Harrington sits on the worn couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, cross-referencing grant applications for the community center where she works. Her reading glasses sit halfway down her nose. Her phone buzzes. She doesn't look at it immediately. The phone buzzes again, and again. 3 minutes pass before curiosity pulls her attention away. She picks it up. The first notification is from a news alert. The second, the third. They arrive in rapid succession like a fever spike. Her thumb moves across the screen, and her entire body goes rigid. The headline burns across her vision in bold caps. Billionaire, heir Jae-hyun. SEO's hidden family in New York, the woman and the child behind the secret life. Beneath it, a photo. Jae-hyun, the man she knows as Jae, the man she married 5 years ago, standing outside their apartment building. His face is turned away, but it's unmistakably him. Beside him in the image, though the photo is blurred, is their daughter's pink backpack. The article explodes across every major platform within seconds. TMZ, the New York Times, Korean news outlets screaming in Hangul characters she can't fully read. But the headline translates through every language barrier. Secret, hidden, deception. Her hands begin to tremble. The phone's light reflects off her face, her dark eyes wide, her breathing shallow. She reads the opening paragraph twice, then 3 times, the words refusing to arrange themselves into anything resembling sense. Jae-hyun Seo, 41, billionaire heir to the Seo Group conglomerate, has been living under an assumed identity in New York for the past 5 years. Documents obtained by this outlet reveal that Seo has been masquerading as Jae Han, a freelance business consultant, while maintaining a family structure with an American woman, identified as Nyla Harrington, 36, and their daughter. The revelation comes after months of investigation into the disappearance of Seo from Seoul's corporate scene. She cannot read further. Her vision blurs. The door opens. Jae-hyun enters, drenched. His dark hair clings to his forehead. Water drips from the cuffs of his shirt onto the hardwood floor. The floor they'd sanded together last spring. The floor where their daughter had taken her first unassisted steps 3 months ago. He doesn't notice Nyla immediately. He's fumbling with his keys, his phone already buzzing in his pocket with the same relentless rhythm. Then he sees her face. The transformation is instantaneous. His wet features, moments ago arranged in the exhaustion of a late night at work, reorganize themselves into something she has never seen before. Pure, unadulterated dread. Nyla, don't. Her voice is not loud. It's worse than loud. It's the sound of something breaking quietly inside her. Don't you say anything. She holds up the phone. The screen catches the lamplight. The photo of him appears between them like evidence at a trial. Who are you? She asks. Not, what have you done? Not, why did you lie? The question is existential. It strips away every moment, every touch, every promise whispered in the dark. It asks him to explain himself backward, from this moment to their first meeting, to redefine the architecture of their entire shared existence. His mouth opens, closes, opens again. Behind them, on the second floor, small feet patter across the ceiling. The sound of a child stirring from sleep. Leah appears at the top of the staircase in her pink pajamas, her stuffed bear, the one Jae-hyun had given her at birth, clutched under her arm. Her curly hair is sleep mussed. Her brown eyes, still heavy with dreams, search for the source of the commotion. "Mommy," she says, her voice small and confused. "Why are you crying?" Nyla hadn't realized she was crying, but her hands shake as she lowers the phone, and tears track silently down her cheeks. The phone slips from her fingers and hits the hardwood floor, The screen cracks, a spider web fracturing outward from the center, but the headline remains visible, readable, impossible to deny. Behind the window, a flash of white light explodes like a star-going supernova. Then another, and another. The street below erupts with activity. Cameras, reporters. The muted chaos of an encroaching world. Car doors slam. Voices shout questions in English and Korean, overlapping, demanding, relentless. Jae-hyun moves toward the window to close the blinds, but it's too late. The apartment has been breached, not physically, but in every way that matters. The sanctuary is shattered. The man who had built himself a life of careful anonymity stands illuminated, exposed, as photographers below capture his silhouette against the apartment's interior light. His eyes meet Nyla's across the small living room. And in that glance, she understands something that will define the next weeks of their lives. He had always known this moment would come. He had simply chosen to pretend it wouldn't. The world has found the man who was running from himself. If the person you love isn't who they claim to be, if they hid their entire identity, their wealth, their family, their name, would you stay long enough to understand why? Or does love end where trust breaks? The opening credits fade, and we drift backward. 5 years earlier, New York, a different season. Autumn light filtering through the tall windows of the community center on 110th Street. The glass is old and beveled, casting fractured light across the gymnasium floor where Nyla coordinates an after-school program for children from the neighborhood. She is younger here in this memory, or perhaps just less tired. Her hair is braided in cornrows pinned at the base of her neck. She wears a soft gray hoodie with the community center's logo on the chest, and her movements have the efficiency of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, has made peace with the world's demands, and doesn't expect much in return beyond a paycheck and the occasional smile from a child who's learned something new. The kids are chaotic, boys running through an impromptu soccer game, girls clustered around a craft table making something with felt and hot glue. Nyla moves between them with a referee's authority, breaking up small disputes before they escalate, asking questions that redirect anger into conversation. She is, in short, exactly who she presents herself to be. This precision will become important later. That afternoon, a man enters through the gymnasium doors. He is dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, both immaculate despite the October humidity outside. His hair is dark and carefully styled. There's a discreet luxury watch on his wrist, not ostentatious but present, a quiet claim on something beyond the ordinary. But his face carries an expression that contradicts his grooming, a kind of careful uncertainty, as if he's walked into a place he didn't quite expect. He's holding a portfolio. Nyla, intercepting a pass that went wildly astray from the soccer game, nearly turns an ankle when she notices him. She catches herself, hands the soccer ball back to the nearest child, and approaches him with her professional smile, warm but bounded, the smile of a woman who has learned not to attach too much hope to moments. "Can I help you?" she asks. "I'm looking for the director," the man says. His voice is calibrated, carefully neutral. His accent is barely perceptible, the kind that suggests multilingual upbringing, corporate environments, soundproofed offices. "I have a proposal regarding a donation." This is not unusual. The community center is perpetually underfunded, and occasionally, idealistic individuals or corporate entities remember that tax write-offs and charity work can align perfectly. Nyla has heard countless pitches. She has learned to recognize the genuine ones almost immediately. This man's eyes, though, are different. There's something in them that suggests he's not entirely sure why he's here. "I'll get Mr. Richardson," she says. "Is there a particular initiative you're interested in?" "All of them," the man replies, still maintaining that careful distance. "I'm interested in all of them." 10 minutes later, the man, who introduces himself only as Jae Han, independent consultant, sits across from the center's director, Richard Richardson, who is 60, tired, and has learned not to ask too many questions when money is offered. The portfolio contains no company letterhead, no identifying information beyond the name. And yet, When Richardson opens the documents inside, he finds detailed renderings of what the community center could become: a renovated gymnasium, a new computer lab, a kitchen for the free lunch program. The total investment requested, $500,000. "Who do you represent?" Richardson asks, the question slipping out before he can stop it. "Myself," Jehan says calmly. "I believe in the work that happens here. I'd like to see it expanded." "And what do you want in return?" The man, Jae-hyun, though he would not give that name for another 3 years, considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "Anonymity," he says finally. "I don't want my name attached to the donation. No plaques, no press releases, no recognition. The work should speak for itself." Richardson, who has worked in nonprofit administration for 40 years, recognizes this as either genuine altruism or elaborate money laundering. The project is too specific, too well researched to be casual. But the terms are clear, and the money is real. "I'll need to verify the funds," Richardson says, somewhat redundantly, since no one in his position would accept $500,000 on faith. "Of course," Jehan replies. He provides an account number, a wire routing instruction. Within 48 hours, the money arrives, irreversibly in the community center's accounts. No one ever asks Jehan questions again. He returns to oversee the construction. He's there 2, sometimes 3 times a week, wearing clothes that suggest middle-class prosperity, good jeans, the kind of shoes that cost $300 but don't advertise it, a leather jacket that has been broken in to perfect softness. He reviews blueprints with the contractors. He approves material selections. He moves through the renovation with the air of someone accustomed to making decisions about large sums of money. But always, he avoids the main gymnasium during the hours when Nyla's program is running. Until one Wednesday in November, when the heating system fails catastrophically, and the community center's director has to reschedule everything into the renovation site, the partially constructed, dust-heavy, sawdust-floating new gymnasium, because it's the only space available. The children sit on temporary bleachers. Nyla has organized them into a seminar on conflict resolution, which is her passion, teaching young people from neighborhoods that have normalized violence that there are alternative languages for anger. Jae-han, checking on the HVAC installation, stops in the doorway. Nyla doesn't notice him at first. She's speaking to a group of 6th graders, and her entire presence has shifted into something more luminous. She's animated, gesturing, asking them questions that she lets hang in the air long enough for real answers. "When someone disrespects you," she's saying, "your first instinct is to defend yourself, right? To match the energy. But what if, just what if, the goal isn't to win the argument, but to be understood?" One of the boys, Marcus, 11 years old, with anger in his eyes that suggests a home life that contains more volume than peace, raises his hand. "That's fake, though," Marcus says. "People don't care if you're understood. They just want to dominate you." "Sometimes," Nyla agrees. And there's something in the way she says it that suggests she's lived the truth of his statement. Sometimes people do want to dominate. But I'm asking, if you respond to that with your own need to dominate, what do you think happens? "Escalation," one of the girls, Keisha, says quietly. "My mom and my stepdad, they're always escalating. It never stops." Nyla's expression shifts into something deeper, something that holds space for Keisha's truth without trying to fix it. "So what would be different," Nyla asks, "if someone chose a different response?" The question lands not because it has an obvious answer, but because Nyla clearly doesn't expect one. She's simply asking them to sit with the possibility. Jae-han watches from the doorway, and something in him, some carefully compartmentalized part of him that had learned to armor itself against emotion, quietly fractures. After the session ends, he lingers as the children file out. Nyla is gathering materials, her movements economical. She doesn't acknowledge him until he steps fully into the gymnasium. "The heating should be restored by Friday," he says. introducing himself with the efficiency of someone used to business-like interactions. "I apologize for the disruption to your program." Nyla looks up. For the first time, her professional smile slips slightly, revealing something more genuine. "It's fine," she says. "Actually, the kids are fascinated by the construction. They keep asking questions about structural integrity and engineering. You'd think it was a field trip." "And you?" Jaehan asks. "Do you ask questions?" The question hangs there, far more loaded than his surface tone suggests. Nyla sets down the stack of papers she's been holding. She studies him for a moment, not with suspicion, but with the careful assessment of someone who has learned that most people reveal themselves in how they ask questions. "Are you asking if I'm curious about you?" she says. "I'm asking if you believe people can be more than what they present to the world," he says. It's an odd question. It should feel manipulative. Instead, it feels almost desperate. "I think," Nyla says slowly, "that most people spend their lives hiding something. I'm just not sure it's worth the energy." "What if it is?" Jaehan presses. "What if hiding is necessary?" "Necessary for what?" Nyla asks, and her tone suggests she genuinely wants to know, not that she's playing at interest. "For freedom," he says quietly. "What if freedom only exists in the spaces where no one knows who you really are?" Nyla considers this. The gymnasium is nearly empty now, the afternoon light slanting through the high windows, casting everything in amber. "I think," she says finally, "that freedom you buy with lies isn't freedom at all. It's just a different kind of prison." She returns to gathering her materials. Jaehan stands in that gymnasium for several seconds longer, letting her words settle into him like a stone dropping into water, the ripples radiating outward from a center that feels newly vulnerable. "My name isn't Jaehan," he says suddenly. Nyla stops. She turns to face him again. "Okay," she says, and her tone suggests she isn't actually asking who he really is. She's asking whether he wants to tell her. "But I can't tell you the truth yet," he continues. "Not because I don't want to, but because the truth isn't simple." Nyla shoulders her bag. She walks toward the door where he stands. "Most truths aren't," she says as she passes him, "but they don't become simpler by waiting. They just become more complicated." She leaves him standing alone in the partially renovated gymnasium, dust particles suspended in the amber light like tiny galaxies, and Jaehyun Seo, who has just spent the last 5 years erasing Jaehyun Seo from existence, realizes with crystalline clarity that he has just met someone who will demand he become real again. The terrifying part is that he wants her to. It takes him 3 weeks to return. Jaehan, still, always, the assumed name, arrives on a Tuesday afternoon with coffee. 2 cups, from a cafe that Nyla doesn't usually frequent, which means he had to drive 20 minutes out of his way. The coffee is exactly how she takes it. Oat milk, 1 sugar, a touch of vanilla. There's no way he could have known this unless he asked Richardson, who works with Nyla daily. She accepts it with a raised eyebrow. "What do I owe you?" she asks. "A conversation," he says. 1 hour, off the clock. They meet at a cafe nearby, a place that attracts the neighborhood's creative class. Artists, graduate students, writers typing manuscripts into laptop screens. The ambient noise provides cover for conversations that need privacy without screaming privacy through the choice of location. Jaehan orders tea. Nyla notices he doesn't eat anything despite the cafe being full of pastries and small plates. She's filing this detail away, though she's not sure why yet. "I need to ask you something," he says, and his careful corporate polish has cracked slightly. "Do you believe people deserve second chances?" "Depends on what they're trying to change," Nyla says. "Are we talking about someone who made a mistake, or someone who chose a lie?" "What if it's both?" he asks. "Then they have to choose which one matters more, the lie or the person they want to become. You can't apologize your way out of believing you deserve to hide forever." He absorbs this. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small, worn notebook. He slides it across the table toward her. I want to tell you, he says, but I need you to understand what you're asking for first. I'm not asking for anything, Nyla says. Exactly, he says, and there's a note of something that might be relief in his voice. You're not asking. That's why I want to tell you. 3 months later, he finally does. It happens during a snowstorm. Unusual for December in New York, the snow falls thick and deliberate, the kind that makes the city quiet. Nyla's apartment is small, studio, barely 800 square feet, but she's managed to make it warm. There are plants on every surface, books stacked in corners, photographs from her childhood on the walls. Her mother young and defiant, Nyla as a child with gap teeth and big dreams. Jay brings wine. He arrives precisely at 7, punctuality being something burned into his neural pathways, and he is nervous in a way that transforms his composure into brittleness. My real name, he says, not bothering with preamble, is Jae-hyun Seo. Nyla doesn't react visibly. She waits. I'm the heir to the Seo Group conglomerate. It's a family corporation, construction, real estate, manufacturing. My mother is the chairman of the board. My family is significant in soul. And you're here, Nyla says slowly. Because I was drowning, he says simply. Because everyone in that world had ownership over me before I was old enough to understand ownership. Because my name opened doors and closed doors and defined me before I had any say in who I wanted to be. He takes a sip of wine, buying time. 5 years ago, he continues, I decided to disappear. I had access to money, my own money, separate from the family accounts. I had a friend, Daniel Park, who knew how to create documents, how to build a new life on paper. I became Jae-han. I moved to New York specifically because it's a city where no one cares who your family is. A city where you can be anonymous by choice. Your family knows? Nyla asks. My mother suspects, he says. But she doesn't know where. And until recently, I thought she had accepted it. And then, Nyla prompts. And then you asked me if freedom requires lies, he says, meeting her eyes. And I couldn't answer because the answer was yes. All of my freedom was built on lies. My name, my background, my wealth. Every single part of me that felt real was constructed from falsity. Nyla sets down her glass. The snow continues to fall past the window, the city transforming into something soft and temporary. Why tell me? She asks. Because, he says, and his voice carries a vulnerability that seems foreign on him, like a sound his vocal cords had never been trained to produce. I'm tired of running, and you're the first person in 5 years who's made me want to stop. It's not the kind of confession that leads immediately to reconciliation. Instead, it leads to 3 months of something more complicated. Dates where Nyla asks questions and receives answers that spiral into more questions. Dinner conversations about identity and inherited expectations. Walks through Manhattan where Jae-hyun points out buildings his family developed, architecture his grandfather designed, empire constructed brick by brick. She meets Daniel Park, the loyal friend who had facilitated the disappearance. He's a former soldier, something in him still tactical, still assessing threat levels. When he shakes Nyla's hand for the first time, his grip is firm but not aggressive, a man testing whether she's someone worth protecting. She passes, apparently. Nyla also learns about Jae-hyun's mother, Kim Yoon-suk, 63 years old, a woman who came from nothing and built herself into the most powerful business person in Seoul through sheer determination and an apparent willingness to make decisions that would keep her awake at night. The photographs he shows Nyla depict a woman whose smile never quite reaches her eyes. She's why you left, Nyla says, understanding flowering into her voice. She's why I had to, Jae-hyun confirms. She loves me, I think. But her love is conditional on my participation in the empire. She was teaching me to see people as resources, problems to solve, commodities to leverage. And you didn't want that, Nyla says. I didn't want that. He agrees. I wanted something small, something real. By March, they are inseparable. Jae-hyun has stopped pretending to maintain the freelance consulting fiction. He works remotely, managing his personal investments, which are substantial. And he moves through Nyla's world with the deliberateness of someone learning a new language. He volunteers at the community center. He helps her with her after-school program. He makes mistakes that reveal his learning curve. He doesn't understand the cultural references that the children make. He occasionally uses words that belong to corporate environments, not playgrounds. But he corrects himself, and he listens when Nyla explains. One Tuesday, he brings home a blue umbrella. It's old, slightly torn, with broken reinforcements. He found it on the subway, he claims, and thought it was perfect. Perfect for what? Nyla asks, laughing. For sharing, he says. For walking in the rain and holding close. For pretending you're both dry when you're actually both soaked. It becomes their umbrella. When he proposes, he does it in the community center gymnasium, the renovated space that his donation built, during one of her conflict resolution sessions. The children are present. He kneels down in front of her, and he pulls out a simple diamond on a gold band. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that screams wealth. Marry me, he says, and help me remember that freedom means something different than I thought. The children erupt into cheers. Nyla, who has spent her entire life protecting herself against exactly this kind of vulnerability, says yes without reservation. They marry 6 weeks later. Small ceremony. Her family, which consists of her cousin on her mother's side, and one aunt who made the trip from Atlanta. His is represented only by Daniel Park, who serves as a witness and walks beside him like a brother. What neither of them acknowledges, standing in the small chapel in Brooklyn, exchanging vows about honesty and truth, is that the foundation they're building is made of sand, that Jae-hyun has made a choice to compartmentalize, to allow parts of his identity to remain dormant, submerged, not exactly hidden, but not volunteered. When Nyla says, "I promise to love you for who you truly are," she means it with the entirety of her being. She doesn't know that she hasn't yet met who he truly is. And Jae-hyun, listening to her vow, makes a silent internal promise. She will never have to. It's the promise that will destroy them. For 2 years, the lie works perfectly. Nyla becomes pregnant 6 months after the wedding. The pregnancy is uncomplicated, joyful. Jae-hyun attends every appointment, holds her hand through the ultrasounds, watches their daughter take shape inside her, with an expression that hovers between wonder and terror. Leah is born on a humid August morning. She arrives angry, screaming into the world with the lungs of someone determined to be heard. Jae-hyun, present at the birth despite having no cultural framework for it, his own mother hadn't permitted him in the delivery room 16 years ago, cries when they place the infant on Nyla's chest. She looks like you, Nyla says, exhausted, euphoric, altered in ways she hadn't anticipated. She looks like both of us, Jae-hyun corrects, and there's something in his voice that suggests he's making a wish, a prayer, a desperate hope that this child will be able to claim both of her heritages equally, both of her parents' truths. Their life becomes, for a time, almost mundane. They move to a 2-bedroom apartment. Jae-hyun continues managing investments from a home office. Nyla takes a 6-month leave from the community center, returns part-time when Leah is 3 months old. They navigate the chaos of parenthood with the particular blindness that only new parents possess. Exhaustion so profound that it becomes spiritual. Love so massive that it reorganizes their cellular structure. The umbrella, now 4 years old and even more tattered, remains by the front door. But cracks begin to appear in small ways. A stranger approaches Jae-hyun on the street, bows with a deference that seems excessive for a casual encounter. Nyla asks who he is, and Jae-hyun deflects so smoothly that she doesn't immediately notice he hasn't answered. He pays cash for everything, restaurants, small purchases, deliveries, which she attributes to privacy concerns until she realizes it might mean more. Daniel Park visits more frequently, His conversations with Jae-hyun in the kitchen, when Neela is ostensibly sleeping, carry undertones she's learned not to question. Then, one October evening, a magazine appears on their coffee table. It's Korean. Nyla doesn't read Korean, but she recognizes the photograph on the back cover. It's Jae-hyun, younger by several years, standing in a glass atrium beside an older woman. She shows him the magazine without speaking. Jae-hyun's face goes the color of concrete. "My mother," he says, not answering the actual question. "That photo is from a business event, 5 years ago. Before you disappeared," Nyla finishes. "Yes. Why is it appearing now?" she asks. "I don't know," he says, and she recognizes the lie. Not in the words are technically true, but he does know why. He simply isn't saying. That night, Leah sleeps between them in their bed, and Nyla lies awake, cataloging everything she doesn't know about her husband, the gaps in his history, the phone calls he takes in the bathroom, the day he came home with a new phone, more secure, whatever that means. The email addresses she noticed on his computer, all variations of his assumed name. The building blocks of the lie are everywhere. She had simply chosen not to see them. A month later, there's a corporate donation that arrives at the community center. $200,000, transferred from an entity she doesn't recognize. When she questions Richard Richardson about it, he becomes evasive. "Someone interested in expansion," he says. "Don't ask me who." The contract includes anonymity. Nyla goes home and confronts Jae-hyun directly. "Are you still managing money for your family?" she asks. "No," he says, which is true enough. "Are you managing money from your family?" He doesn't answer immediately. They're standing in their kitchen. Through the open door, she can see Leah playing with her stuffed bear, unaware that her parents are having a conversation that will later seem like a threshold they crossed without fully understanding the implications. "I manage investments," Jae-hyun says finally. "Some of those investments involve Korean entities. It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it," Nyla says. "My family," he says carefully, "is looking for ways to support communities they believe matter. They do it through shell corporations, because it's simpler, legally. It allows them to maintain the anonymity they prefer." It's a half-truth engineered to sound like a whole one. Nyla, despite her insistence on honesty, accepts it, partly because she wants to, partly because she's learning that pressing on the lie makes it bleed into other parts of their lives. The donation remains, the anonymous gift that keeps giving to the community center, and Neela files the questions away in a corner of her mind marked for later examination. That later examination never comes. Instead, Jae-hyun becomes more present in their lives. He is, by any objective measure, an extraordinary father. He reads to Leah every night, his careful pronunciation of English children's books slowly losing its formality. He teaches her Korean at 2 years old. He takes her to the park on weekends, pushes her on swings, catches her at the bottom of slides with the particular vigilance of a man protecting something irreplaceable. And at night, with Nyla, he is tender and careful and passionate, as though he's trying to build love so substantial that it can support any weight, weather, any storm. The sex between them carries a note of desperation that Nyla interprets as intensity, as the deepening of their connection, not as the frantic attempt of someone trying to reinforce a foundation he knows is cracking. When Nyla finds herself pregnant again, they celebrate. Jae-hyun cries again at the first ultrasound. The same tears, the same prayer that their children will be able to live in both worlds equally. But Nyla, 3 months into the second pregnancy, miscarries. It happens at work, at the community center, during an after-school program. She's bleeding, she's cramping, and she knows immediately that it's over. The ambulance ride to the hospital is a series of fluorescent lights and clinical questions, and a void where joy had been moments before. Jae-hyun arrives at the hospital and finds her crying in a way that has nothing to do with hormones and everything to do with loss. He sits beside her bed, and he finally breaks. "I'm sorry," he says. "I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry." "For what?" Nyla asks, because she assumes he means the miscarriage, the loss, the randomness of biology. "For everything," he says, and the rawness in his voice suggests he means something far broader. "For not being the man you think I am." But Nyla, in her grief, chooses not to press him on it. She lets him hold her hand, and she pretends his regret is simply about the child they've lost, not about the fundamental dishonesty of their life together. It's another threshold they cross without quite seeing it. The miscarriage changes something in Nyla that Jae-hyun recognizes but cannot articulate. She becomes, if not harder, then more defined. Her boundaries more explicit, her questions more pointed. She stops accepting deflections the way she used to. After she returns to work, after the physical recovery is complete, she starts asking about his family in ways that demand real answers. "What does your mother do?" she asks one evening while they're making dinner. "She runs a company," Jae-hyun says, which is accurate but incomplete. "What kind of company?" "Construction, real estate, some manufacturing." "How big?" "Very big," he says, and there's something in his tone that suggests further questioning will not be welcomed. But Nyla has learned that she is the only one who gets to define her own boundaries, and she presses forward anyway. "Do you talk to her?" she asks. "Not directly," Jae-hyun says. "So, someone else?" "Daniel handles some communications," he admits. "Why?" Nyla asks. The answer that comes is a question. Would you still love me if you knew everything? It's the moment where Nyla should ask for clarification, should demand the full truth, should stop pretending she doesn't understand that the foundations of their life are actively shifting beneath them. Instead, she says, "I don't know." The honesty of it hangs between them like a barrier. Jae-hyun sets down the knife he's been using to cut vegetables. He doesn't look at her directly. "Then I have to assume the answer is no," he says quietly, "and I can't survive that assumption." It's both a declaration of love and a warning. Nyla hears both components, but she chooses to believe only the first. For the next year, they maintain a careful equilibrium. Jae-hyun continues his work, his investments, his anonymous donations to the community center, and several other nonprofits that Nyla works with or cares about. He is present in their lives in ways that matter. He shows up. He pays attention. He loves their daughter with a tenderness that moves people who see them together. But there's a distance now that wasn't there before. Not physical. He still touches her, still holds her at night. But emotional. Something has shifted in him. A knowledge that the lie is expanding, metastasizing, growing beyond his ability to contain. Then, one Tuesday evening in early October, 3 years after they met, Jae-hyun comes home with coffee that he's picked up specifically from the cafe where Nyla usually has her breaks. 7:30? He asks, referring to the time. "Our time?" He's been calling it our time for the past year. Tuesday evenings after Leah is asleep, when they sit together and talk about things beyond the logistics of their lives. Nyla agrees, and they settle on the couch with the coffee cooling between them. "I need to tell you something," Jae-hyun says, and his voice carries the weight of someone who has rehearsed this conversation but is still terrified of it. "I'm listening," Nyla says. "If I tell you the complete truth, not the partial truth, not the edited version, but everything, I'm asking you to make a choice," he says. "The choice to either accept me as I am or to leave. And I understand that leaving is the rational response. But I also know that I can't keep living in the space between truth and fiction." Nyla's heart rate accelerates. She sets her coffee down. "Tell me," she says. Jae-hyun takes a breath. He's about to speak when Leah's voice comes from upstairs. She's had a nightmare. She's calling for her mother. Nyla gets up. She leaves Jae-hyun sitting on the couch, the moment suspended like a held breath. When she returns, 15 minutes later, Leah asleep again, The moment has shifted. Jae-hyun has moved to the window, and he's looking out at the street below, where a car is parked that wasn't there before. "Tell me now," Nyla says. "Whatever you were going to say it." "My mother knows where I am," Jae-hyun says quietly. "She's had me followed. The investigators found Leah at her school. They found you at your job. They have photographs, Nyla. They have documentation of our entire life." "How long?" Nyla asks. "She made contact with Daniel 3 months ago," he says. "She wants me to come home. She wants to meet Leah. She's threatening to expose the truth if I don't comply." "Expose what?" Nyla demands, though she already knows the answer is larger than she's imagined. "Everything," Jae-hyun says, turning from the window to face her. "My real identity, my family, my wealth, our marriage conducted under assumed names, the financial trail of every decision I've made since I disappeared." Nyla sits down heavily on the couch. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asks. "Because she's given me an ultimatum," Jae-hyun says. "Come to Seoul by the end of the month, or she's releasing everything to the press. And if that happens, Nyla, I can't control how they'll frame it. I can't control what they'll say about you. I can't protect you from the scrutiny." "I don't need your protection," Nyla says sharply. "What I need is the truth, all of it. Who you are, how much money, where it comes from, what your mother wants, what the consequences are. Everything." Jae-hyun sits across from her, and he begins to speak. For 2 hours he talks. He tells her about the Seo Group, the empire built by his grandfather and expanded by his mother. He tells her about his position as designated heir, the expectations that began before he could walk. He tells her about the pressure, the surveillance, the slow realization that his own name was not his own, that his life had been written for him in corporate bylaws and family strategy documents. He tells her about the $500,000 he donated to the community center. That came from his own accounts, his own money that his mother doesn't technically control but has influence over. He tells her about the additional donations, the anonymous gifts, because he was trying to build something good without admitting to the source of the wealth. He tells her about Daniel Park, his oldest friend, the man who had helped him create Jae-han, because he believed that Jae-hyun needed freedom more than he needed family loyalty. He tells her that his current net worth, excluding the family holdings, is approximately $200 million. Nyla struggles for words. "I'm not sure I understand how we bridge the gap between that number and this apartment." "We don't," Jae-hyun says. "That's part of what I realized. I can't be Jae-han forever and be honest with you. Jae-han's net worth is incompatible with working as a freelance consultant and living in Brooklyn." "So what do we do?" Nyla asks, and her voice carries a desperation that suggests she already knows the answer. "My mother wants me to choose," Jae-hyun says. "Come back to Seoul, resume my role, use my position and wealth as she dictates, or she destroys the lie." "And you?" Nyla asks. "What do you want?" For a moment, Jae-hyun doesn't answer. He looks at her, really looks at her, in a way that suggests he's memorizing her face. "I want to wake up and have none of this be true," he says finally. "I want to have been the man you believed I was. But I can't give you that, because that man was also a lie." Nyla stands up. She walks to the door, grabs the tattered blue umbrella, and leaves the apartment. She's not running away. She's trying to run toward clarity, but there's no direction she can walk that takes her there. The umbrella was supposed to represent imperfect protection. Instead, it's just revealed how little protection it actually offered. Nyla doesn't come home that night. She stays with Tasha Brown, her closest friend from the community center, and she tells Tasha everything in a rush of words that sounds almost like crying. Tasha listens, and then she holds Nyla, and then she does the thing that real friends do. She doesn't tell Nyla what to do. "He's still the same man," Tasha offers hesitantly. "The same person you married." "No," Nyla says, and the certainty in her voice is terrifying. "The same person I married doesn't exist. He was always going to be someone else. By morning, her phone is full of messages from Jae-hyun. Apologies, explanations, please, and one message asking her to meet him at the community center, where it had all begun. Nyla arrives to find him sitting in the gymnasium, the renovated space that his money built, that carries no trace of his real identity. He looks like he hasn't slept. He's in jeans and a sweater, his hair unwashed, his face carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent the night understanding that his entire life might be ending. "I didn't want this," he says as soon as she enters. "Not the money, not the lie, not the consequences. I wanted to build something real with you, Nyla. I still do. But I can't do it on a foundation of fiction." "Then what do we do?" Nyla asks, sitting across from him. "Do we go to Seoul? Do we reveal everything? Do we split up? What's the version of this story that has an ending?" "I don't know," Jae-hyun says, and his voice carries a helplessness that she hasn't heard before. "My mother wants me to resume my position in the company. She's willing to accept you, I think. She's not thrilled about Leah, but she'll accept her because she's blood. But I'm not sure you'll accept a life where you're married to a billionaire. I'm not sure I'll accept a life where I have to be one. So we're at an impasse," Nyla says. "We are," Jae-hyun acknowledges. Nyla stands up. She walks to the high windows where the October light is streaming through. She thinks about the first conversation they had in this space, the questions he asked about freedom, about necessity, about the price of honesty. "I need time," she says finally. "I need to process what this means. I need to talk to a lawyer, possibly, about what our marriage even is if both of our names aren't real. I need to think about what kind of life Leah gets to have, and what my role in that is." "And us?" Jae-hyun asks. "I don't know if there's an us," Nyla says, and the words break something in both of them. "Not until I understand who I was married to in the first place." Over the following weeks, Nyla enters a strange liminal space. She and Jae-hyun continue to live together. There's no practical alternative, and she won't upend Leah's life until she understands the parameters. But they exist in careful proximity. They don't share a bed. They communicate about logistics. Leah's schedule, household bills, the mechanics of maintaining a life together while simultaneously not being together. She meets with a lawyer who explains, in careful terms, that their marriage license contains Jae-hyun's assumed name, but is still legally valid. The state of New York doesn't require verification of identity beyond what they provided. They are, technically and legally, married. But the lawyer suggests that if Jae-hyun's real identity becomes public, there might be questions about the validity of various documents. Jae-hyun, during this time, communicates with his mother for the first time in 5 years. The conversation happens via video call, mediated by Daniel Park, and Nyla watches from the kitchen doorway as Jae-hyun speaks to a woman whose age and bearing suggest she has never been denied anything she wanted. "I will not abandon my wife," Jae-hyun says in Korean, language he switches to when he's speaking with someone who demands his full attention. "I will not pretend she doesn't exist," his mother responds, her voice clipped through the computer speakers. "Your wife," she says in English, switching languages in a way that suggests she's making a point, "is a complication that was entirely avoidable. She's my family," Jae-hyun says. "She's a distraction from your responsibility," his mother replies, "which you abandoned the moment you decided to play at ordinary life." When the call ends, Jae-hyun looks hollowed out. Nyla doesn't ask what his mother said. She knows from the shape of his despair that it was the truth, delivered without mercy or pretense, the same way she herself has learned to speak to him. It's 3 weeks after the initial revelation when Nyla finds herself sitting across from Jae-hyun in their apartment, and she's decided something. "I'll stay married to you," she says, "with conditions." Jae-hyun looks up from the book he's been pretending to read. Condition 1. We're transparent from this moment forward. No more compartmentalizing. If your mother reaches out, I know. If your financial situation changes, I know. If you have a thought you've been keeping from me, you tell me. Agreed, he says immediately. Condition 2. We tell Leah the truth, age appropriately, but truthfully. She deserves to know who her father is. Agreed, he says again, though his voice carries hesitation. Condition 3. You give Daniel Park authorization to begin transfer of enough assets into a trust for Leah that I control, so that she always has the independence to choose her own life. I don't want her growing up dependent on your family's money. Done, Jae-hyun says. And condition 4, Nyla continues. We take time before we make any decisions about going to Seoul, resuming your role, being public in any way. We take that time to figure out what kind of life we actually want, not what your family demands or what the world expects. Jae-hyun reaches across the small table between them, and he takes her hand. I'll spend the rest of my life honoring these conditions if you'll let me, he says. We'll see, Nyla says, not letting go of his hand, but not committing to forever either. Let's start with tomorrow. That night, they sleep in the same bed again. Not for sex, though they eventually make love with the particular tenderness of people who are rebuilding something they believed was broken beyond repair. For closeness, for the reminder that their bodies knew each other before their minds understood the complications. For 6 months they maintain this fragile new architecture. Jae-hyun tells Leah the truth in the way that only a father could, with age-appropriate honesty that reframes his reality as simply, Daddy had 2 names and lived 2 different lives, but he was always your daddy in both of them. Leah, at 5 years old, accepts this with the particular logic of childhood, which is essentially, okay, but do you still make my favorite breakfast? The answer being yes, everything is resolved in her understanding. Nyla and Jae-hyun attend therapy, for couples, individually, and sometimes Daniel Park joins them to provide his perspective on the lie and its architecture. The therapist, a Black woman named Dr. Williams, who specializes in issues of identity and trust, helps them parse the difference between betrayal and fear, between deception and self-protection. He lied to protect himself, Dr. Williams says during one joint session. He lied to protect me, Nyla counters. Or so he thought. Perhaps both are true, Dr. Williams suggests. The lie contained multitudes. It was built on fear and love in equal measure, which doesn't make it okay, but it does make it human. They begin to look forward rather than perpetually backward. Jae-hyun finds work that feels more honest. He becomes a philanthropic advisor, helping family offices and individuals of significant means develop giving strategies that actually address systemic issues rather than just creating tax write-offs. He's good at it because he understands the guilt that wealth creates. He understands the desire to use money to salve a conscience. Nyla receives a promotion at the community center, moving into a director role. She oversees program development, manages staff, and continues her conflict resolution work. But now with the added complexity of understanding that conflict is often more nuanced than she'd previously believed. They buy a house. Not a large one. A modest 3-bedroom in a mixed-income neighborhood in Brooklyn where their Black identity and his Korean identity both mean something, where Leah's mixed-race features are simply ordinary, where they're neither the richest family on the block nor the poorest. Jae-hyun installs a garden. He's never done it before, but he learns from YouTube videos and from Nyla's mother, who visits for the first time and is cautiously optimistic about him in a way that suggests she's decided to wait for evidence before committing to forgiveness. The blue umbrella is hung in a place of honor by the front door. But underneath this peace, there's a current of obligation, a thread pulling back toward Seoul, toward family, toward the world that Jae-hyun had abandoned, and that is slowly beginning to demand his return. His mother's pressure increases in subtle ways. There are board meetings that require his attention. There are business decisions that require his input. There are opportunities that require his participation. Each request comes through Daniel Park, each one framed as optional, but carrying the weight of family expectation. Jae-hyun refuses them all, initially. But by month 6, he's weakening. I think I need to go, he tells Nyla one night, as they're lying in bed, the house quiet around them. Go where? Nyla asks, though she knows. Seoul, he says. for a week, to establish clear boundaries with my mother, to meet with the board, to signal that I'm alive and that I've made my choice, so they stop trying to manipulate me into returning. Will that work? Nyla asks. I don't know, Jae-hyun says, but I think it's the only way to move forward. Right now, there's a part of me that's always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I think that part is eroding everything we're trying to build here. Nyla doesn't want him to go, but she understands that he needs to, and there's something in the architecture of their rebuilt life that requires his autonomy. Go, she says finally, but we talk every day, and you come back with clear answers about what your family can and cannot demand from you. Jae-hyun leaves 2 weeks later. He's gone for 4 days when the first news article appears. It's a Korean publication, but it picks up in English language outlets almost immediately. SEO group Heir emerges after years in hiding. CEO Kim Yoon-suk's son appears in Seoul for first time in 5 years. The photograph shows Jae-hyun, dressed in an impeccable suit, walking into a SEO group corporate office. His expression is neutral, professional, the face of someone who has been briefed on how to appear in front of cameras. Nyla sees the article before Jae-hyun calls to tell her about it. I'm sorry, he says, his voice small through the phone. The press was waiting at the office. I didn't anticipate. It's okay, Nyla says, though it's not, though it's the opposite of okay. What happens next? We're issuing a statement, Jae-hyun says. My mother and I together. It's going to acknowledge that I've been living privately for several years, and that I'm now reclaiming my position with the company. It will also mention my family. Nyla's heart rate accelerates. What does mention mean? She asks. It means, Jae-hyun says slowly, they're going to say that I'm married with a daughter. They're going to release our names. They're going to frame it as a return to responsibility and family. Nyla closes her eyes. When? She asks. Tomorrow morning, Jae-hyun says. The statement drops at 6 a.m., Seoul time. That's midnight here, Nyla says. I know, Jae-hyun says. I wanted to tell you first. I wanted you to hear it from me. But what Nyla hears, underneath his words, is, I'm choosing my family's narrative over protecting you from it. She doesn't say this. Instead, she says, come home. I am, Jae-hyun says. I'm on the first flight tomorrow. He's not home when the statement drops at midnight. Instead, Nyla is alone in the house when her phone begins to light up with notifications. The articles spread across every platform in a matter of minutes. The statement is carefully worded. It presents Jae-hyun's marriage and daughter as proof of his stability, his readiness to take on family responsibility. It includes Nyla's and Leah's names. It includes a photograph of their house. Within an hour, the American press picks it up and begins searching. By the time Jae-hyun lands, Nyla's phone has received 17 calls from journalists, 5 from people claiming to be relatives she didn't know she had, and dozens of messages on social media ranging from congratulatory to concerning to explicitly racist. She's sitting in the dark of their living room when he arrives, and she doesn't turn on the lights as he enters. I'm sorry, he says immediately. You chose them, Nyla says quietly. When it came down to it, you chose your family's interests over protecting me and Leah from becoming public. I was trying to control the narrative, Jae-hyun says desperately. I was trying to make it so that when it came out, and it was always going to come out, it came out on our terms. It wasn't my terms, Nyla says. I didn't consent to being public. I didn't consent to having my name and my daughter's name attached to your family's empire. I know, Jae-hyun says. And I'm sorry. But Nyla, we can't uninhabit this moment. We can only move forward. How? Nyla asks. How do we move forward when the entire world knows who we are now? In the dark of the living room, neither of them has an answer. The morning after Jae-hyun returns, Nyla makes a decision. She calls the community center and tells them she needs to take a leave of absence. She doesn't explain why. She just needs space, needs distance from the world that knows her name now, her face, her identity inextricably linked to a billionaire's return. By afternoon, photographers are staking out their house. It's not the press he'd anticipated. It's not the polished, formal Korean journalists who had appeared at the SEO group offices. These are paparazzi, street photographers, the predatory wing of the industry that smells a story in mixed-race marriage to an Asian billionaire, in the intersection of wealth and identity, in anything that can be framed as scandal or novelty or human interest. They capture photographs of Nyla taking out the trash, Leah playing in the backyard, Jae-hyun arriving home with groceries. Each image is a violation of space they'd thought was theirs. Jae-hyun's security detail, which appears without warning, tries to manage the situation by blocking photographs, by redirecting the photographer's access, but there are too many of them and too much demand for content. On the third day, a photograph appears online that changes everything. It's a photo of Nyla, taken without her knowledge, likely through the back fence of their property. In the image, she's holding Leah, and there's an expression on her face that suggests she's in genuine distress. The photograph is captioned with a single word: hidden. The implication is devastating in its subtlety. That Nyla is being kept hidden, or that she is hiding, or that their relationship is somehow shameful or secret despite being public. The photograph transforms from an invasion of privacy into a narrative, a story about a woman trapped by wealth and circumstance. Within hours, the photograph has been shared 20,000 times. Comments multiply underneath it, ranging from sympathy to voyeurism to explicit racism, suggesting that she has no right to this life, this wealth, this man. Nyla sees the photograph and breaks something inside her. She doesn't cry. Instead, she calls the lawyer, and she begins the process of filing for separation. "I can't do this," she tells Jae-hyun that evening. "I can't be public property. I can't have my daughter photographed without consent. I can't have my life narrated by people who don't know us. We can fight this," Jae-hyun says desperately. "We can hire a PR firm. We can take the photographers to court. We can be miserable together," Nyla finishes. "Or we can be honest. And I'm choosing honesty." "Nyla, please," Jae-hyun says. "Please don't do this." "You did this," Nyla says. And her voice is steady in a way that terrifies him, because it suggests she's made a decision she's not going to reverse. "You chose to come back to Seoul. You chose to have the statement released. You chose to put me and our daughter on display. Now you get to live with the consequences." "I made those choices for us," Jae-hyun says. "No," Nyla says. "You made them for your family, for your legacy, for your company. And I'm not willing to sacrifice my peace for your redemption arc." The separation proceeds with the kind of swiftness that suggests money can facilitate anything. Jae-hyun buys a house 3 blocks away. He retains joint custody of Leah, but Nyla has primary physical custody. They begin a careful dance of parallel parenting, existing in close physical proximity while maintaining emotional distance. It's during this time that Daniel Park comes to see Nyla. He finds her at the community center, where she's returned to work with a kind of fierce determination, as though proving to the world that her identity extends beyond being Mrs. Seo. "He's falling apart," Daniel says, not bothering with preamble. "Good," Nyla says, without looking up from her computer. "He made a mistake," Daniel continues. "He was trying to be strong, to handle things with his family without dragging you further into the chaos. That wasn't his choice to make," Nyla says, finally turning to look at Daniel. "He made me part of this by marrying me. He made me part of this by having a child with me. And then he made decisions about my public image without consulting me. That's not strength, Daniel. That's cowardice dressed up in responsibility." Daniel accepts this. He sits across from her, and his expression carries the particular sadness of someone watching someone else destroy something he'd invested in protecting. "He loves you," Daniel says quietly. "I know," Nyla says. "But love isn't enough anymore. Love was enough when it was just us, and the lie we'd agreed to live. But now his love comes with strings attached to his family's expectations, to his wealth, to a life I never signed up for." 3 weeks after filing for separation, Nyla finds a sealed envelope in her mailbox. It's handwritten, in Jae-hyun's careful script. "I've been thinking about what you said, that love and truth should walk together. I've been thinking about how I tried to architect a reality where both could be true simultaneously, but I only succeeded in creating a space where neither existed fully. I'm sorry. Not for loving you, but for not having the courage to love you honestly before the world demanded I choose. I want to rebuild this. I want to prove that I can be the man you married and the man you actually deserve to know. But I understand if you no longer believe that's possible. The blue umbrella is still by your door. I think it always will be. It's waiting for rain and hands to hold together. When you're ready, we can try again. But I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to heal. Jay." Nyla reads the letter 3 times. On the third read, she allows herself to cry. But she doesn't respond. Not yet. The kidnapping happens on a Tuesday. Leah's school is small, progressive, the kind of place where the boundaries between institution and family are deliberately blurred. When Jae-hyun picks her up at 3 p.m., the teachers don't think to question him. He's Leah's father. He has documentation. He's on the list. Except he isn't. The man who arrives at 2:55 p.m. is dressed in a driver's uniform, carrying identification that appears to be from Jae-hyun's security detail. The teachers, understaffed and overwhelmed, release Leah to him without verification. By the time Nyla's phone rings at 3:30 p.m., Leah has been missing for 35 minutes. The school's director is on the line, apologizing profusely, explaining the mix-up, offering excuses that mean nothing against the central fact. Nyla's daughter is gone. Nyla calls Jae-hyun, who hasn't picked Leah up yet. For a moment, they both exist in a state of paralysis, the moment before they understand what's happened. Then Jae-hyun is on his way to the school, to the police station, to everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The police arrive. They ask questions. Nyla is too panicked to understand most of them. She keeps repeating, "My daughter is 5 years old. Her name is Leah Han. She has curly hair. She carries a stuffed bear." The bear, of course, has become iconic. When the school photos appear in news reports an hour later, Leah is holding the bear in her school picture. The bear becomes the symbol of her absence. Within 6 hours, the kidnapping is public. Within 8 hours, every major news outlet is covering it. The angle inevitably focuses on the billionaire's hidden daughter, the scandal that preceded this crime, the suggestion that Jae-hyun's return to Seoul had made them vulnerable. Billionaire heir's daughter abducted in New York. Former security lapse blamed, reads one headline. Leah Han, 5, missing since Tuesday afternoon. Police investigate links to SEO group conglomerate, reads another. The public narrative crystallizes almost immediately. This is about money, power, the extension of corporate conflict into personal spaces. Jae-hyun receives the ransom demand at 11 p.m. It comes through an encrypted email, directed to him specifically. The demand is not actually for money, though the email threatens that as a secondary measure. The demand is simpler. Jae-hyun must resign from the SEO Group board, publicly withdraw from his inheritance, and issue a statement claiming that his presence in Seoul is destabilizing the company. They don't want money, Daniel explains to Nyla and Jae-hyun, who are sitting in the FBI's temporary command center in their neighborhood. This is business. This is corporate. Someone wants you out of the picture. Where's Leah? Nyla asks, which is the only question that matters. Alive, Daniel says, because he's had to learn how to communicate the brutal reality that sometimes alive is the only victory available. Proof of life was included. She's safe, relatively speaking, as long as demands are met. The night becomes a nightmare of procedures and protocols. Nyla has to describe what Leah was wearing. She has to provide recent photographs. She has to answer questions about Leah's medical history, her fears, her particular vulnerabilities, as though summarizing her daughter into a data profile might facilitate her return. By dawn, there are 7 FBI agents stationed in their house. There are wiretaps and trace protocols, and a kind of law enforcement infrastructure that suggests the government understands the weight of this particular crime. Jae-hyun wants to comply with the demand immediately. He's ready to sign whatever documents, make whatever public statements, destroy whatever legacy, the company, the inheritance, his position in the family structure, if it means Leah's return. But the FBI counsels patience. Don't react immediately, they advise. Let them demonstrate that they're serious. They are serious, Nyla says, her voice hollow. They took my daughter. The waiting becomes its own particular torture. Nyla and Jae-hyun sit in their separate lives. She at the house, he at his temporary rental, and they exist in a state of suspended animation, waiting for their daughter to come back, waiting for the next communication from the kidnappers, waiting for the world to remember that Leah is a person and not a plot point. The media coverage is relentless. Their separation becomes a narrative. Did marriage breakdown leave billionaire's family vulnerable? Their career choices are scrutinized. Why was mixed-race billionaire's heir's daughter attending public school? Everything about their lives becomes evidence, becomes potential motive, becomes suspect. On the second night, Neela breaks. She calls Jae-hyun, and she demands that he come to the house immediately. When he arrives, she's in Leah's room, sitting on the small bed, surrounded by the evidence of her daughter's presence. Drawings, books, the small shoes she wore last week. I can't do this alone, Nyla says. I can't wait for her to come home alone. Jae-hyun sits beside her on the bed, and he takes her hand. We'll wait together, he says. And despite everything, despite the separation, despite the betrayal, despite the fundamental fractures in their relationship, they do. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. On the third morning of Leah's kidnapping, a junior analyst in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division makes a connection. She's been tracking corporate acquisitions, regulatory filings, and board changes in the Korean conglomerate sector, because sometimes kidnappings are just violent expressions of business conflict. What she discovers is that Jae-hyun's return to prominence coincides with Seo Group's rejection of a hostile acquisition proposal. A rival corporate entity, led by a man named Junho Park, who had worked with Jae-hyun's mother for 15 years before a spectacular falling out 5 years ago, had been systematically attempting to acquire Seo Group's assets. Jae-hyun's return makes him a symbolic obstacle. If he's publicly positioned as the rightful heir, the company becomes less vulnerable to takeover. But if Jae-hyun steps aside, if he's discredited or compromised by a kidnapping, the company becomes unstable, and its board becomes more likely to consider acquisition as a way of stabilizing operations. It's not personal, the analyst tells Jae-hyun and Nyla. Or it is, but the kidnapping is secondary to the business conflict. The realization doesn't help them find Leah, but it does reframe the problem. They're not negotiating with someone motivated by simple revenge. They're negotiating with someone playing chess, using Leah as a piece, calculating moves in advance. Daniel Park uses this information to negotiate a different path. He contacts Junho Park, no relation to Daniel, and he suggests that there's more money in allowing Jae-hyun to remain in his position than in destabilizing him. Jae-hyun has resources, legitimacy, family support. If Junho Park wants to acquire Seo Group, he's more likely to succeed if Seo Group is internally stable than if it's convulsing through crisis. The counteroffer: allow Leah to be released unharmed in exchange for information that damages Junho Park's acquisition timeline, allowing Seo Group to reinforce its defenses. It's a deal that reframes the negotiation entirely. It moves from coercion to mutual benefit, from one side having all leverage to leverage being more balanced. On the fourth morning, Leah is released. She's discovered by a jogger in Central Park, wrapped in a blanket, still holding her stuffed bear. She's unharmed physically. She's traumatized in ways that will require years of therapy, but she's alive. When Nyla sees her daughter, when she's allowed to see her, after she's been examined by medical personnel, something in Nyla shatters and reforms simultaneously. The world reorganizes around this single point. Her daughter exists, breathing, present, alive. Jae-hyun, watching Nyla hold Leah, loses control entirely. He kneels in the hospital room, and he cries in a way that seems to come from a place so deep that it predates language. "I'm so sorry," he says, again and again. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I brought this into your lives. I'm sorry I thought I could hide from my past. I'm sorry I lied about who I was." Nyla doesn't speak. She can't speak. She holds Leah, and she watches Jae-hyun fall apart. And she understands something that she's been learning in increments. His lie didn't create the danger. His family's complexity did. His wealth did. His position did. The lie was just one architecture among many that created a vulnerability. But that understanding doesn't absolve him. It just contextualizes his culpability. Over the following days, as Leah begins her recovery and the FBI works to build a case against Junho Park, Neela and Jae-hyun exist in parallel grief. They're not together, not exactly, but they're not separated either. There's something in between. Two people who share a child, who have loved each other, who have hurt each other, who are learning that all of these things can be true simultaneously. Nyla sits with Leah during her therapeutic sessions. Leah, at 5 years old, is resilient in the way that children can be, but she's also marked. There are things she will need to process for years. There are moments when she wakes in the night, and Nyla realizes that her daughter is experiencing something that the world is determined to frame as a story to be consumed, rather than a trauma to be survived. Jae-hyun uses his resources to hire the best therapists, to create a secure environment for Leah's recovery, to do everything that money can accomplish in the face of psychological crisis. But money can't undo the experience itself. One evening, a week after Leah's recovery, Nyla finds Jae-hyun in the backyard, the garden he planted, the earth he tried to make grow. He's sitting on the ground, his hands in the soil, and he's crying silently. She sits beside him. "I ruined everything," he says. "No," Nyla says, and she means it. "You made choices that had consequences. Those consequences were devastating, but you didn't ruin everything. Leah is alive. I'm alive. We're bruised, but we're not destroyed." "Are we going to survive this?" Jae-hyun asks. Nyla considers the question seriously. She thinks about the woman she was when she first met him, the man he was pretending to be, the people they've become through the chaos of revelation and loss. "I think," she says slowly, "that survival isn't the right metric. I think the question is whether we can rebuild something that's actually grounded in truth, whether we can accept each other without the scaffolding of lies." "Can we?" Jae-hyun asks. "I don't know yet," Nyla says, "but I'm willing to find out." 6 months later, Leah begins kindergarten at a new school, a private institution with security measures that allow for something approaching normalcy. The kidnapping, like most traumas, begins to recede into the background of their lives, not forgotten, but integrated, processing into long-term memory rather than immediate crisis. During this time, Jae-hyun and Nyla begin to rebuild, not immediately as a couple, but as something more foundational. Two people learning to exist as their authentic selves. Jae-hyun stops compartmentalizing. He's transparent about his business dealings, his family dynamics, his wealth. He opens his financial accounts to Nyla's examination. He doesn't ask her to accept anything on faith. Instead, he provides evidence. Nyla, similarly, begins to grieve the man she thought she married. It's a specific grief, not for the person Jae-hyun is, but for the false version, the imagined version, the man who never existed except in the space between truth and fiction. They go to therapy together. Dr. Williams, their therapist, helps them establish new ground rules for their relationship. "Truth is the non-negotiable foundation," Dr. Williams says during one session. "But truth also requires compassion. Jae-hyun lied to you, but he lied from a place of fear. Understanding that doesn't excuse the lie, it contextualizes it." "And forgiveness?" Nyla asks. "Does understanding lead to forgiveness?" "Forgiveness," Dr. Williams says, is a choice you make about whether you want to continue forward with this person. It's not absolution. It's not pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's deciding that the hurt is something you can carry together, and that carrying it together is worth the effort. By month 4 of their gradual reconciliation, Jae-hyun and Neela are spending most evenings together. They're not living together. The separate houses remain their status quo. But they're becoming intimate again, not in a physical sense initially, but in the deeper sense of actually knowing each other. Jae-hyun brings her into his world carefully. He introduces her to Daniel Park officially, as the woman his friend was helping him protect, not as a side effect of his disappearance. He takes her to meetings with lawyers and accountants, walks her through the architecture of his wealth, helps her understand the family business dynamics. And Nyla brings him into hers. She takes him to community center events, introduces him to the young people she works with, shows him the life that exists beyond his framework of money and power. It's during one of these events, a youth mentorship program, that Jae-hyun experiences a moment of clarity. He's watching Nyla lead a group discussion about identity. She's asking the young people, who decides who you are? Do you get to define yourself, or does the world define you? One girl raises her hand and says, the world always defines you first. Then you have to fight to define yourself. And Nyla nods, and she says, that's the real work. Defining yourself despite what the world says you should be. Jae-hyun watches her, and he realizes that Neela has always been doing this work. She's been fighting to define herself, as a woman, as a black woman, as a professional, as a mother, against all the narratives the world tries to impose on her. And he had added another narrative to that weight. The narrative of the billionaire's wife, the hidden woman, the scandal-adjacent person. After the event, he tells her, I'm sorry for adding to the voices telling you who you should be. Nyla takes his hand. I know, she says, and I'm learning to forgive you for that. Which isn't the same as forgetting it happened, but it is moving forward. 9 months after Leah's recovery, Jae-hyun receives a call from his mother. He takes the call in his office, the dedicated space where he works on philanthropic projects, far from the corporate infrastructure that had once defined him. His mother's voice comes through the phone with the particular weight of someone who has built her entire life on structure and expectation. Your father would have been 65 today, she says without preamble. I'm hosting a memorial at the house in Seoul. I want you and your family to attend. The your family is loaded. Jae-hyun hears it. His mother is making space for Nyla and Leah in the family narrative, grudgingly, because she's learned that refusing to do so costs her access to her grandson. Though Jae-hyun has made it clear she's more likely to maintain that access if she extends genuine welcome to Neela rather than begrudging acceptance. We'll be there, Jae-hyun says. It's the first time Nyla will travel to Seoul. It's the first time Leah will see the world that produced her father. It's the first time Jae-hyun's mother will meet her daughter-in-law and granddaughter in person, rather than through the lens of scandal and investigation. The flight to Seoul is long, and Leah becomes cranky halfway through, and Nyla sits between Jae-hyun and her daughter, and she experiences a moment of perfect clarity. This is her life now. This complicated, messy, constantly negotiated existence with a man she loves and a child she would die for, and a family that exists in permanent tension with her identity. When they arrive at the SCO family house, which is actually a compound, a structure so vast that it requires staff to navigate, Neela experiences something between disorientation and culture shock. Everything is intentional. Everything is designed. Everything speaks of power and wealth expressed through aesthetic control. The gardens are Japanese-inspired, but distinctly Korean. The architecture is modern, but incorporates traditional elements. Even the way the family arranges themselves in the sitting room suggests hierarchical understanding that Nyla's American context didn't prepare her for. Kim Eun-suk greets them in formal Korean, bowing to a precise degree that takes Jae-hyun a moment to reciprocate. When she turns to Nyla, the bow is slight, but it's present, and it registers as an acknowledgement, if not quite a welcome. "Welcome," she says in English, her accent suggesting she learned it in boardrooms rather than classrooms. "You have traveled far." "Thank you for inviting us," Nyla says, matching her formality, understanding intuitively that this is not a moment for informality. It's only when Unsuk sees Leah that her expression shifts. Leah, 6 years old now, has her father's eyes and her mother's hair, and she carries herself with a kind of cautious curiosity that suggests she's evaluating the situation at hand. When she bows to her grandmother, coached by Jae-hyun for the occasion, Yoon-suk's carefully maintained composure fractures slightly. "She looks like Jae-hyun," Yoon-suk observes. "She has his eyes," Nyla says, and there's something in her tone that's both assertion and invitation. A statement of fact that also invites Yoon-suk to notice what else Leah possesses, what else she is beyond the similarity to her father. The memorial takes place in the afternoon. Extended family members arrive, cousins, aunts, uncles, people whose names Nyla can't quite retain. They're introduced to her, each introduction a kind of formal negotiation where they ascertain her status, her background, her relevance to the family structure. Jae-hyun stays close to her throughout. It's his way of signaling that she belongs, that her presence isn't incidental, that she matters in his world. During the memorial itself, Jae-hyun speaks about his father, a man he'd had a complicated relationship with, a man who had embodied the corporate expectations that Jae-hyun had ultimately rejected. But speaking about his father, Jae-hyun recasts their dynamic, not as a failure, but as a necessary conflict that had ultimately clarified what Jae-hyun valued. "My father," Jae-hyun says in Korean, his words translated for the family members who speak English, "taught me that legacy is something you inherit, but I've learned that meaning is something you choose. I'm grateful for the legacy, but I'm defining my meaning." He looks at Nyla when he says it. The gesture is clear. Meaning is here, with this woman, with this life. After the memorial, Yoon-suk invites Nyla for tea. Just them. Just the two women. They sit in a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden, and Yoon-suk pours tea with the precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times, each gesture a performance of civilized power. "My son was always going to disappoint me," Yoon-suk says without preamble. "I raised him to understand the value of duty. He chose love instead. This was always going to be disappointing. I'm sorry he couldn't fulfill your expectations," Nyla says carefully. "You're not sorry," Yoon-suk says, and there's something in her voice that might be respect. "You're glad. You wanted him to disappoint me, so that he would be available to you." Nyla doesn't deny it. "I wanted him to have the freedom to choose," Nyla says finally, "whether he chose me or not." "He did choose you," Yoon-suk says. "Despite everything, despite his family, despite his responsibility, he chose you. He chose a version of me that didn't exist," Nyla corrects gently. "And when the version he actually married showed up, he had to rebuild." Yoon-suk sips her tea. For a long moment, she doesn't speak. "Leah will have opportunities," she says finally. "Jae-hyun will ensure that. She will have wealth, education, access. She will be able to choose her own path in a way that my son was never permitted." "That's what he wanted," Nyla says. "That's what I am learning he wanted," Yoon-suk corrects. "And perhaps eventually, I will understand why that matters." It's not a reconciliation, but it's a negotiation. And negotiations between women who love the same man are at least a framework for something. By the time they return to New York, something has shifted. Jae-hyun and Nyla move back into the house together. There's no dramatic ceremony about it, no moment where they formally decide to reconcile. Instead, it's a gradual accumulation of small decisions. His toothbrush appearing in her bathroom, his clothes gradually appearing in her closet, his presence becoming so integrated with hers that separation feels unnatural. Leah, for her part, is relieved. She doesn't remember the separation as anything other than a confusion, a period where her parents were apart, and now they're not. Children are resilient in this way. But Nyla and Jae-hyun know that resilience isn't the same as healing. They go back to therapy together. They establish new agreements. Jae-hyun makes a formal commitment. No more secrets. No more compartmentalization. If something matters enough to affect their life together, it's discussed. If something threatens to impact their family, it's addressed immediately. Nyla, similarly, commits to forgiveness, not as forgetting, but as moving forward with the understanding that Jae-hyun had lied from a place of fear, and that fear, while not justifying the lie, does contextualize it enough to make reconciliation possible. They renew their vows in the community center gymnasium, the space that started everything. The ceremony is small, just them, their immediate family, and a handful of close friends. This time, when they exchange vows, it's not about the fantasy of who the other person might be. It's about the reality of who they've become through the crisis. "I vow to know you," Nyla says. "Not the version you think I want, but the actual you. Complicated, flawed, trying. I vow to demand honesty, even when it hurts. And I vow to forgive you, not because the hurt didn't happen, but because I believe we can rebuild something stronger than what we had before." Jae-hyun, his voice steady, says, "I vow to stop protecting myself by hiding. I vow to be transparent, even when it's difficult. I vow to honor the woman you are and the mother you've become. And I vow to spend the rest of my life understanding that love requires vulnerability, and that vulnerability is worth the risk." They exchange rings, new rings, not the ones from their first marriage. These rings are darker, more textured, designed by a Korean artist who works with reclaimed materials. They're beautiful because they're flawed, because they bear the marks of their own reconstruction. Life, after the vows, is not simple. It's not the fantasy that either of them had imagined when they first met, but it's honest. And honesty, they've learned, is the only foundation strong enough to support a love like theirs. 1 year after their renewal of vows, Jae-hyun and Nyla sit down and write their story. Not as a confession, not as a public narrative, but as something personal. A document for Leah, written for the day she's old enough to understand the complexity of her parents' love. It reads, in part, "Your father and I met in a gymnasium. He was pretending to be someone he wasn't. I was pretending I didn't notice. We fell in love with the versions we were showing each other, and when those versions weren't real, we had to learn to love the actual people underneath." This is the story of that learning. Leah, 7 years old now, doesn't read the document, but she understands something fundamental about her parents. They chose each other, and they keep choosing each other, even when choosing is hard. She tells her kindergarten class during a discussion about families, "My parents love each other, but sometimes they're sad. And that's okay because they talk about it." The teacher reports this observation to Nyla with a tone that suggests she's impressed by the emotional literacy of a 7-year-old. Jae-hyun, meanwhile, has restructured his life entirely. He's no longer pretending to work as a consultant. Instead, he's become the public face of Seo Group's philanthropic division, a legitimate, visible role that allows him to do the work he cares about while honoring his family's legacy. He's transparent about his wealth. He's visible about his choices. He's become the kind of public figure that his mother had always wanted him to be, but on his own terms rather than hers. Nyla, too, has transformed. She's become the director of the community center, overseeing not just her specific programs, but the entire organization. She's developed curriculum that other community centers around the country are now implementing. She's become visible in a different way, not as a billionaire's wife, but as a woman building something meaningful in her community. One evening, about 18 months after they've moved back together, they sit on their back porch. The blue umbrella, now patched and repatched so many times it's more patches than original, is mounted on the fence as a kind of monument to their relationship. "Do you regret it?" Jae-hyun asks. "Meeting me, marrying me, all of this?" Nyla considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I regret that you lied." she says finally. I regret that I didn't push harder for truth sooner. I regret the kidnapping, the publicity, the way our daughter's trauma became a media spectacle. But the fundamental fact of us? No. I don't regret choosing you, over and over again, even when choosing you was complicated. Thank you, Jaehyun says quietly. Don't thank me, Nyla says. Just keep doing the work. Keep choosing honesty. Keep understanding that love requires constant vigilance against the tendency to hide. They sit together as the sun sets, and neither of them speaks about the past or the future. They're simply present in the moment, two people who have learned to love each other not as fantasy, but as reality. 3 years after the scandal, after the kidnapping, after the reconstruction of their entire relationship, Jaehyun stands in front of a classroom at NYU and discusses corporate ethics. He's become a guest lecturer, not an official faculty member, but someone who brings real-world experience to theoretical frameworks. His students are mostly young, mostly focused on becoming rich. Most of them haven't yet understood the weight that wealth carries. My father, Jaehyun tells them, spent his life building an empire. He succeeded. He was powerful, respected, feared. But I don't remember him being happy. I remember him being defended, surrounded by people whose job was to protect him, isolate him, make him comfortable. But comfortable isn't the same as happy. He pauses, and his students sense that there's something personal in this story. I spent 5 years trying to build a different kind of life, he continues. I tried to erase my father's legacy by erasing myself. I lived as someone else, loved someone else, built something different, and I was happier. But it was built on a lie. And eventually, lies become their own kind of weight. So, what's the lesson? One student asks. That we can't escape who we are? The lesson, Jaehyun says carefully, is that who we are is always complicated. It's not just our circumstances or our wealth or our family. It's also our choices. And our choices only matter if they're made with full understanding of the truth. He leaves class thinking about his daughter, who's now 9 years old. Leah is in 4th grade, comfortable in her mixed heritage, articulate about her identity. She knows that her father is wealthy, that her family is unusual, that her story is complicated. But she's learned to hold all of that without feeling like she has to justify any of it. That evening, when he arrives home, Leah is working on a school project, a presentation about her family's heritage. Can I ask you something? She says, not looking up from her research. Anything, Jaehyun says. Why did you hide? She asks. Why couldn't you just be yourself from the beginning? It's a child's question, asked without judgment, but it cuts to the heart of everything. Jaehyun sits beside his daughter, and he tries to explain fear in a way that a 9-year-old can understand. I was afraid, he says, that if people knew who I really was, they wouldn't like the real me. They would only like the money, the status, the family name, and I wanted to be loved for just me. So I tried to hide all the other stuff. But Mom found out anyway, Leah says. She did, Jaehyun confirms. And she still loved you? Leah asks. She did, Jaehyun says. But it took a lot of work. It took a lot of honesty. And it took us both understanding that love is complicated, and that's okay. Leah nods, and she returns to her project. But Jaehyun can see that she's processing this information in the way that children do. Filing it away, understanding it on some level that her parents' relationship isn't simple fairy tale, but something more nuanced. That night, Nyla asks Leah what she's learned about her family for her project, and Leah explains. Dad hid because he was scared. Mom was angry when she found out, but they loved each other enough to fix it. Nyla and Jaehyun exchange a glance. The kind of glance that married couples develop over time, a language that operates beneath words. They've spent years trying to explain their relationship to themselves and to the world. And their 9-year-old daughter has just summarized it in 3 sentences. Tater, epilogue. The grace of imperfect things. 5 years after the scandal, on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening, The kind of weather that made both Nyla and Jae-hyun sentimental, reminding them of their beginning and all the years that followed. They stand in their backyard. The garden that Jae-hyun planted years ago has grown. The umbrella, battered beyond practical use, has been replaced by a new one, identical to the one he'd given her at their community center meeting, but not torn, not broken, just carefully maintained. Leah, now 11 years old, is inside doing homework. She's comfortable in both her identities. She speaks Korean and English. She moves between her father's world of corporate responsibility and her mother's world of community activism with the fluidity of someone who has learned that complexity is the default state of human existence. The scandal has faded. The kidnapping has been resolved in the justice system. Junho Park serves a prison sentence. The SEO group has stabilized under more ethical leadership. Jae-hyun's mother has even begun to understand that her son's choices weren't a betrayal of her legacy, but an evolution of it. "Do you ever think about what would have happened," Nyla asks, "if that first news article had never been written? If the truth had never come out?" "All the time," Jae-hyun admits. "I think about how long I might have maintained the lie. I think about when it would have inevitably broken. I think about whether we would have survived it if it happened later, when we had less foundation. And," Nyla prompts, "and I think," Jae-hyun says slowly, "that the lie was always going to break. The only question was whether we'd learn to love each other in the aftermath." Nyla takes his hand. The ring on her finger, the one from their renewal of vows, catches the porch light. "I learned something," Nyla says, "from all of this. I learned that I can survive having my life exposed. I learned that I can forgive things I thought were unforgivable. I learned that love isn't a feeling that stays consistent. It's a choice you make over and over again." "And do you still choose me?" Jae-hyun asks, though he already knows the answer. "Every day," Nyla says. "Even on the days when I'm angry with you. Even on the days when I remember what I lost because of the lie. I still choose you." They stand together in the rain, and the umbrella is between them, old but functional, imperfect but sufficient, a symbol of the life they've built. Not the fairy tale either of them had imagined, but something more valuable, more real, more true. The world still knows their story. They've become a kind of parable in business schools about the cost of deception, in therapy circles about the possibility of reconciliation, in media analysis about identity and race, and what it means to be visible in a world that constantly tries to define you. But for Jae-hyun and Nyla, the story is simply their life. It's not a narrative with a clear arc. It's messy, ongoing, constantly being renegotiated. It's what comes after the headlines fade. It's what comes when you have to decide whether truth is worth the work it requires. It's what comes when you understand that love isn't about finding someone without flaws. It's about finding someone whose flaws you're willing to work through, together, without pretense or hiding. As they go inside, Jae-hyun takes one last look at the umbrella. Tomorrow, it will be a Tuesday. Tomorrow, they'll wake up and choose each other again. Tomorrow, they'll work at their respective jobs and manage their family and navigate the ongoing complexity of being people with messy histories, trying to build something clean and honest in the present. And that ordinary Tuesday, that next day, that habitual choice, that's the real story. That's the love that didn't break. That's the foundation they built, stone by stone, truth by truth, forgiveness by forgiveness, until it became strong enough to hold them both.